On Tuesday, Americans went to the polls to vote in the midterms. And as we detailed in our previous video, all polling suggested the Republicans were ready for a red wave.
A red wave.
A red wave.
The red wave.
A red wave.
The red wave.
The red wave. The red wave.
With the GOP seemingly on track to flip both the Senate and the House. However, with the results still trickling in, it looks like the Democrats have outperformed expectations and now stand a good chance of at least holding on to the Senate. So in this video, we're going to be looking at the results, explaining why this is pretty terrible news for the Republicans and what all of this means for the future of Trumpism. Before we get into numbers, if you like our content, then be sure to subscribe to TLDR US and ring the bell for more independent, unbiased US news coverage. So, the first thing to say is that we're making this video on Thursday morning, which means that votes are still coming in, and as such, there's a chance that some of this data will be out of date by the time you're watching. Nonetheless, most of the results are already in, and they strongly suggest that the Republicans have underperformed relative to both polling and expectations. That's because most polls expected the GOP to eke out a majority in the Senate and win somewhere between 225 and 230 seats in the House. The Economist, 538, and Politico all predicted a 51-seat Republican majority in the Senate, while 538 and Politico predicted a 229-seat Republican majority in the House. Now, according to this modeling, the fate of the Senate was set to be determined by the results of 3 swing states: Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Georgia. Now, all 3 races were very close throughout, but the most recent polling before the vote gave the Republicans an edge in all 3 states. 538 had the Republicans up by 1.2% in Georgia, 1% in Pennsylvania, and 0.2% in Nevada. On top of this, Republicans were pretty optimistic about actually outperforming these polls. I mean, to be fair, they did outperform polling in 2016 and 2020, and it did look like momentum was behind them, with the fundamentals looking pretty terrible for the Democrats, with the economy in turmoil and Biden's approval rating in the dumps. However, in all 3 crucial races, it looks like the Democrats have outperformed expectations. In Georgia, with more than 95% of the vote counted, Raphael Warnock is ahead of Herschel Walker by about 1 percentage point, with 49.42% of the vote to Walker's 48.52%, and Libertarian Charles Oliver on about 2%. Now, as no candidate looks likely to reach the 50% threshold, there will almost definitely be a runoff election in early December. But Warnock does look well placed to win, given that he won his runoff in 2020 and the fact that he's already ahead in the polls. In Pennsylvania, with 94% of the votes counted, it looks like John Fetterman has beaten Dr. Mehmet Oz by nearly 3 percentage points. While in Nevada, with about 75% of the votes counted, Adam Laxett has a 2-point lead over Democrat Catherine Cortez Masto. But the votes yet to come in are expected to slightly favor Cortez Masto. And as such, the New York Times is currently predicting the Democrats to win by a narrow 0.4% margin. Now, that's clearly very tight, but in the end it might not matter. That's because assuming the Democrats win in Arizona, where with 66% of the votes counted, Democrat Mark Kelly currently has a 6-point lead over his pro-Trump Republican rival, the Democrats will only need to win either Georgia or Nevada to hold onto the Senate. Now, we should know the exact results for Nevada and Arizona at the end of the week, and when we do, it could lead to the Democrats retaining control of the Senate. Okay, so that's the Senate. What about the House? Well, there, Democrats have also outperformed expectations. While most analysts still have Republicans on track to win a majority, the margins are much narrower than they once were. NBC is currently predicting 218 seats, while the New York Times is projecting 224. Regardless, though, having such a narrow majority will give the pro-Trump Freedom Caucus a de facto majority, which will severely undermine Republican Party unity. And there have already been rumors that the Republicans are considering getting rid of House Leader Kevin McCarthy, whose fence-sitting regarding Trump has irritated both sides of the GOP. Irrespective of that, though, whoever ends up as the Republicans' House Speaker will have to struggle with a divided party. When it comes to the results then, the Democrats are on track to lose the fewest congressional seats as an incumbent in a midterm since 2002, which is particularly astonishing given that A, the economy is doing pretty terribly, and B, Biden's personal approval ratings are lower than basically any modern president, with the exception of Trump. So why have the Republicans underperformed in the polls? Well, it looks like the pollsters failed to account for voters who are motivated to vote by the Dobbs decision, especially younger voters. And there's also been the suggestion that a flood of polls from Republican-leaning pollsters like Trafalgar and Rasmussen towards the end of the race significantly overstated Republican support. However, methodological errors in the polling don't really explain how Republicans failed to take the Senate from a historically unpopular president during a cost of living crisis. So, polls aside, why did the Republicans not do better? Well, some Trumpists have blamed the Republican establishment for failing to properly support their MAGA candidates. But most Republicans are currently doing the inverse and pinning the blame here on Trump. That's because pro-Trump candidates did particularly badly in this election. Both Oz and Walker look like they might lose their Senate races, while ardent Trump supporter Lauren Boebert looks like she might lose in Colorado's 3rd, which would be a pretty stunning upset. Add to that, basically all of Trump's election-denying gubernatorial candidates also lost. In Arizona, Democrat Katie Hobbs is currently slightly ahead of Carrie Lake, a Trumpist and former news anchor who said that she'd ban mail-in voting. In Pennsylvania, ardent election denier Paul Mastriano, who was actually at the Capitol on January 6, has now lost by a surprisingly large margin to Democrat Josh Shapiro. And in New York, Trump-supporting Lee Zeldin lost to Democrat Katie Kochel. On the other hand, though, more moderate Republicans performed remarkably well in their gubernatorial races, with Brian Kemp and Ron DeSantis all winning by wide margins. DeSantis actually had a particularly good night. He outperformed Trump's 2020 vote across all of Florida, even winning Miami-Dade County by a whopping 11 points. The first time that Miami-Dade has voted red in a major election since 2010. Now, Trump's failure and DeSantis' success here presents a real dilemma for the GOP. Trump has strongly indicated that he's going to announce his candidacy on November 15th. But establishment Republicans, and, well, basically any Republican who wants to win in 2024, will now definitely prefer DeSantis, who's clearly a lot more popular. And that's a big issue when Trump is already gearing up for a primary battle with DeSantis, especially when in the aftermath of Tuesday's results, Trump essentially implied that he had dirt on Florida's governor and marked him with the unflattering nickname DeSanctimonious on the campaign trail last month. Similarly, at his victory party, DeSantis' supporters were calling for him to run in 2024, which leaves the stage set for a fascinating showdown between Trump's more extreme MAGA loyalists and DeSantis' more moderate Republicans in 2024. Whoever comes out on top, though, the real winner in an explosive Trump-DeSantis primary would be the Democrats. And if you want to follow that as it happens, then be sure to subscribe to TLDR US. And that's particularly important because, as we mentioned a while ago, out of all of TLDR's channels, US is the worst performing. And as such, we're even considering letting it go. So if you don't want that to happen, then be sure to subscribe, ring the bell, and keep watching TLDR US. Thanks for your support.